Hi there. Today I'd like to go over one of maybe the most influential and widely used theories of personality development. So today I'm going to go over the five-factor personality model. This model, it gives us the framework to better understand human personality, and it also is a way to measure how it affects the way we feel, think, and behave in our everyday lives. So the five-factor model is something that was developed through decades of research. It began in the 80s with Professor Paul Costa and Robert McCrae. They worked very hard to lay down the foundation for the framework for the five different broad categories of the five-factor personality design. So the five broad categories do involve the following. So the first one is openness to experience. The second one is conscientiousness. The third one is extroversion. The fourth one is agreeableness. And then the fifth one is neuroticism. Now, over time, they have added to these categories, and they have broadened the definitions of these, but that's the basic of the framework for the five-factor personality. So now I'd like to go over into each one and go over how certain the high ones and the low versions of these different categories can manifest in human personality development. So first one is the openness to experience. So that is defined in our textbook by Schultz as a willingness to engage with new ideas, experiences, and different opportunities. Oftentimes people with high versions of openness to experience can manifest it through feelings of curiosity, a imaginative kind of mind, and open-mindedness. And oftentimes different research has shown that people who are high in openness are also a little bit more creative. They show different interests in arts, literature, studying, some things like that. And then on the lower end of openness to experience, there's a preparation to routine. There's liking familiar things, not really liking to branch out as much. Typically, people who are low with openness to experience also prefer to stick to a very strict schedule, so they're very organized. An example given by Anna Lim in an article is someone who is high in openness might seek out to travel to new unfamiliar places, whereas somebody who is a little bit lower on the spectrum of openness might have anxiety going to new places, might have to stay indoors a little bit more, and they're more comfortable with the things that they already know. So now moving on to the second one, conscientiousness. And that one is, it's defined as organized, reliable, and self-disciplined. So if someone is very high in conscientiousness, then they might have a very military-like discipline. They might be very dependable, goal-oriented, and they also might be focused on the details. So someone who's high in conscientiousness might be doing a little bit better in school. They oftentimes manifest it through a healthy, clean, tidy environment. They are a little bit more type A, OCD. Someone who is on the lower end of conscientiousness, they might be a little bit more spontaneous, a little bit more flexible in their schedules, but also on the more negative end of the spectrum, they're more prone to procrastination, difficulty completing tasks, difficulty staying on board with one individual thought. So oftentimes their mind drifts a little bit more. Low conscientiousness, it does require an effort to adapt to a different schedule. Jordan Peterson on a YouTube video, he described that someone who was very low on conscientiousness but high in agreeableness and openness said that sticking to a more strict and disciplined schedule is something that can furthermore positively affect somebody and can develop their personality to be a little bit more attuned to different schedules. So. Next, we do have extroversion. So the textbook Schultz does describe this as a degree to which somebody is outgoing, energetic, and seeks social stimulation as a means of a positive affirmation. So on the higher end, they call extroversion extroverts, which is a pretty widely accepted term. It describes someone as being outgoing, socially energetic, talkative, and assertive in their personal relationships. Extroverts often strive in going out in social settings. They have a large number of friends and groups. On the opposite end of the spectrum, on the lower end of extroversion, we do have a widely used term, introverts. So introverts are a little bit more reserved. They find social interactions draining, often prefer to be by themselves. On the other end, introverts are also a little bit more in tune to their inner selves, whereas extroverts find a little bit more confidence with other people and external stimulation. So, for example, an extrovert might spend the weekends partying, going to social gatherings with a group of friends. They might be going out and spending lots of time at the bars and clubs, whereas an introvert might prefer going on long hikes alone, or preferring reading. Or if they are with friends, they might have a small interlaced group of friends that they trust and that they have known for a long time. The next one that we have is agreeableness. So, agreeableness basically describes how cooperative, compassionate, and trusting somebody is. Oftentimes, people who are high in agreeableness, they might be considered a little bit more warm, helpful, and empathetic. So people who are high in agreeableness oftentimes have a little bit longer of relationships. They tend to be a little bit more trusting. They used to be typically a little bit more lighthearted as well. On the lower end of agreeableness, people are a little bit more skeptical, a little bit more competitive, short, and they can come across as a little bit more straightforward. People who are low on agreeableness typically have had past trauma. They have issues with trust, and it can also manifest itself in a little bit of a standoffish tone, even though typically people who are low in agreeableness use it as a defense mechanism. So by an article by Brett Lawson, he did a report, and it shows that people who are high in agreeableness typically record more career stability, less depression, and often they thrive in more social settings as well. They're able to maintain a little bit more of a strict lifestyle that doesn't demand being isolated. So the last one that we have is neuroticism. So neuroticism reflects emotional stability. In the textbook, it describes people who are highly neurotic as stressed, anxious, and they often suffer from mood swings. Low neuroticism can be also defined as emotional resilience, calmness, and typically less stressed and emotionally balanced. So an example is oftentimes if you receive negative feedback, people who are highly neurotic, they might sometimes dwell on it and question their abilities with the emotional negative feedback that they receive. On the other end of the spectrum, low neuroticism is acknowledged by critique, and they learn from it. So they move on with the negative feedback without actually taking it too seriously and taking it to heart, but also moving on from it. So, why does it matter for the five-factor model? Well, it matters because it impacts how people are able to interact, how people are affected with their mental and physical health. There are studies that show that people who are higher on the neurotic spectrum, they typically end up having more serious health implications later on in life, from anxiety, from isolation. So it can be on the mental and the physical side as well. So it's important to factor in these 5 factors and in turn learn how to cope with it a little bit better, which by taking the Ocean Test assessment, you can also get a little bit of a better feel for which areas you might struggle in and be able to cope and adjust yourself accordingly. So most of us fall in the middle of each one. It's not one-sided. Nobody leans too far on one side or the other. Usually you can find yourself right in the middle of these different categories on the high or low spectrum. However, we do eventually have the ability to change these over time. And once you take the assessment and you're able to kind of look at where you veer, you can also take some time to learn healthy coping skills. And so all these are a little bit able to be mended and also moved to whichever side you want to lay on. So the 5-factor model is affected by environment, life experiences, and can often shift. In conclusion, Paul Costa and Robert McCrae just hit the tip of the iceberg as far as the development of personality. The contemporary study of personality development can be learned a lot from these 5-factor models. Oftentimes taking a look within, taking these assessments, even though they are self-reported, can lead somebody to a better view of enlightenment and able to develop their personality further. So because of this 5-factor model, people are able to better have a more simplified but also meaningful understanding of their own personality. Thank you.